Hey guys, it's Nicole, and as promised, I'm going to walk you through my grow setup. So I've got about 40 different orchids here, and I grow them on shelves under LED lights. And the way that I've got them broken out is I've got smaller shelves, rather shorter shelves for some of my highlight plants, and I put them really close. So I've got a lot of Cattleya types up there. Then I've got some of my taller plants a little bit further down. These are dendrobiums, which are a little tall, and I've got some oncidiums that are a little taller. Then I've got some other orchids that I prop up a little bit to get closer to the light source. And on the bottom, I've got a few others. So I grow under these LED lights, which I'll link down below, but I've got them set up so that there are maybe about 4 or 5 different tubes directly under the lights. We'll get a little bit closer to the setup in a bit, but it seems to work nicely. I have a fan running along with the orchids. I'll be getting a little bit more. I'll get a few more fans going since I've expanded the collection recently, so I need to make sure that there's air circulation all around. I don't have a humidifier going because it's pretty warm here. In this room, it tends to be about 85, 90 degrees and between 50 and 60% humidity at any time. It's a spare bedroom. I don't have an AC going, so it doesn't get too dry. So it stays pretty humid. But this is where the majority of my plants are, in my apartment. So this is, like I said, a spare bedroom. Got them on this shelf, which I got from Amazon. It's 3 feet wide by 6 feet tall. I'll link it down below as well. And I've got these little grow lights. They are, I got them on Amazon as well. My plants seem to be doing all right. Some of them actually have gotten a little bit burned, so I've had to adjust them. But I'll take you guys closer. Here's some of the orchids I have in my top shelf. So I have them potted mostly in bark and perlite mix, and then I add a little bit of sphagnum moss. And I keep them inside of a ceramic container, and it's to make sure that there's humidity in the pot. This one is in pure bark, but this one I keep up top, and it's a highlight. It's a Brasileia Cattleya Prata Green Deluxe, so it needs a lot of light, and so far this new growth is doing pretty well. But I keep them in these plastic pots because it keeps a lot of moisture in. So these plants, they can dry out pretty quickly, especially since it's so hot all the time, so it keeps a lot of the humidity in. So they seem to like it. As you can see, this one has a nice growth over here, so it's doing pretty well under these lights. These are 4-inch pots. I got them from Repotme. The roots are growing in nicely, and so far they seem to be liking it. So since I don't have that much window space, they're doing just fine under these shelves. Let me show you another one. So these are all Cattleya types. You can see the moss on the bottom to maintain a little bit of the moisture. And if we look in, you can see some of the roots growing in and a new growth right here. So I think they're doing just fine. This is a Putnera Jerry Refilled Paradise Fuchsia. These are pretty young. Some of them are a little bit older. This one's young. This one's doing exceptionally well. You can see that the roots are growing right out of the pot. So I have to be really careful when I put it in. But I got this with very few roots. I actually repotted it just like about a month ago, and none of these roots were here. So they seem to like it. You can see it's growing right through. All of this is new, all of it. You can see the little root tips. So these plants are really liking the setup. And you can see this is also a new growth. So yeah, they're very happy with this setup. So I try to pot them in these 4-inch pots if they're a little bit smaller. These are Cattleya type orchids, so I keep them on my grow shelf with the lights very close. and they're liking it just fine. So it's doing really well. I like this setup. I'll link you guys to the ceramic pots because I find that it's best to not have a pot that is dripping water all the time, especially on my wood floors. So that's why I keep as many as I can in the setup. Some drawbacks with the lights is that I have to be really careful. They can be a little bit strong. As you can see here, this one got a little bit burned. This is my Tolumnia. So I had to move this further away from some of the lights. But my Cattleya types are liking it pretty nicely. This one I think is really liking it because the color has lightened a bit. I don't know if you can see, but it's a nice healthy lighter green. And this one already bloomed actually. So this one's a mature plant and I'm able to keep it pretty close. You can see a nice new growth over here. I'll take you guys a little bit closer so you can see the rest of the setup. So like I said, I've got it broken out where the Cattleya types are up top very close to the lights because they have high light requirements. And so far they're growing roots and really thriving so far. So I'll keep you guys posted on new blooms under this setup, but the lights are pretty intense and they seem to be responding really well. Down here, I've got some smaller plants and you know, I know they're pretty tight. So there's about 40 here. So this is how I'm able to grow in my apartment. It's a 3 feet by 6 foot shelf with a clip-on fan over here. But the way that I have them broken out is I've got the highlight requirement plants up top, very close to the lights. I've got these medium-sized plants, and what I do is some Cattleyas didn't fit up top, so what I did was I put a little pot to get them closer to the light source. So this helps a lot in getting the plants the lights that they need. And if you're in an apartment, the biggest challenge with these plants is making sure they get the right light levels. So I raise them so that they're a little bit closer and so that they can get adequate light. I'll walk you guys through the rest of my collection in another video, but I've got some Oncidiums here and I put them in clay pots and I regret it. So I've got them in sphagnum moss. They dry out really quickly, so I have to water them almost every day, which is sort of a pain. But this one I got from my mom. I took this plant maybe 2 months ago, and this is a Shari baby. This one's growing a nice new growth. It had a leaf that was in bad shape and a little bit crinkly over here, which means it wasn't getting enough water. But I'm taking good care of it, getting it the moisture it needs. Definitely with Oncidiums, sphagnum moss is good in my climate, but maybe next year when I repot this, I'm gonna put it in a plastic pot that will maintain more moisture. So I like this setup because you have the plastic pot, it maintains moisture, but also the ceramic keeps some of that moisture in. So I water maybe 2 or 3 times per week just because it's really hot. And I'll show you guys right now. Yeah, it tends to be about 90 degrees in here, which is brutal, but nobody is in this room, thankfully, so nobody's suffering. And the plants really like it. So I keep my taller plants further down. I'm getting some new lights that will give more coverage. So the lights I have are 2 feet. I found some grow lights specifically that are 3 feet, but you can see that there's a gap there. So it's a spot where some plants won't get as much light as they can, but I'm trying to balance it out and see how they do. So the taller the plant, the further you are, the less light you're getting. So I'm testing it out to see how it does. I am getting some new lights that cover more space, but I'll keep you guys posted. So far everything's growing really nicely. So those 2 in the back are my oldest Oncidiums. You can sort of tell because one of them is very abused. I'll tell the story about that one. It was my second orchid ever. I've had it for a really long time, and I got it before I really knew how to take care of it. That one's also a Shari baby, but I'll share a video on a story on that one soon. But It looks like the oncidiums are getting sufficient light. I'm just more worried about the dendrobiums and the cattleyas I have on my windows right now. So those require highlight conditions, which is tough in an apartment because you have limited windowsill space. So the best solution is growing under lights. And I use grow lights specifically. They're not super expensive. The technology has come around quite a bit. They don't consume that much power. But yeah, this is an efficient way to grow a lot of orchids at once. So I've got about 40 here. I've kept a few of my plants over there, but I've got 40. And they're a mixture of very highlight plants that I keep very close. And I have even a low light papillopetalum in the back. But I'll keep you guys updated. I do have some Phalaenopsis orchids that I grow on some of my lower light windows, which I'll show you guys another time. But yeah, this is a basic setup I've got. One clarification to add to all of this, I keep talking about these ceramic pots maintaining a lot of moisture. So orchids need a lot of air as well. So that's why we plant them in bark chips. So the bark chips make sure that the orchids aren't getting too much moisture. So when I say that I pot it in plastic and it retains moisture, it's because it maintains some level of moisture. It's definitely not wet in there, but if you leave it out sort of like this, it will dry out a little bit faster. But it's definitely not wet in here. So we don't want that to be wet, which is why we don't grow it in soil, which is why you'll see bark and wood chips within these orchids. So when I put it in a plastic pot, it's just to maintain the moisture within, but it's not wet, it's not inside of soil. It just makes my life a little bit easier. And one clarification with the clay pots, they wick a ton of moisture, so they breathe and they dry out fast. So a lot of orchid growers use a lot of clay pots. They do have a good place when you're growing orchids because it won't keep things soggy. So sphagnum moss maintains a ton of moisture, but if you have a plant like a cattleya, they don't like so much moisture. So the cattleya prefers things more dry. And Oncidium, they like it more moist. So that's why I have the different setups, though I do regret this clay pot because I have to water all the time. And the smaller the pot, the faster it dries out. I don't use a humidifier because it's quite humid at 60% right now, but in the winter there is a radiator in here, which I will see what I need to do. I may have to get a nice big humidifier for these orchids. Some of them don't need it, but some others prefer it. Like I have a very high humidity orchid right here. This one is a Diachia hendersoniana. That one requires like 80% humidity, so we'll see how that goes. And the Maxillaria tenuifolia in the back, they like humidity. So I'll adjust when the winter comes. And now that I've got so many. So this is the overall setup, guys. This is how I grow. I have 53 orchids at this point. I have 40 here, and this is a nice space-saving way to grow them within an apartment.